Alright, so hey you guys, today I think I'm going to be doing something a little bit different than what I normally do. You may notice I have someone here next to me. Do you want to tell the nice, lovely people at home who you are?
Hey guys, I'm Deane. I am an old-time friend of Ben's who has recently started transitioning. I'm a trans man. I'm going to explain what that means if you guys aren't sure. So again, my name is Deane. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'll also talk about why pronouncing is so important.
It's something that I have noticed a lot recently is that within, the LGBT community, LGBTQIA community, especially within the media, there's been so much stuff on the G, the L, and even the B, the T, and all the rest of it has kind of just gone to the wayside. And in an attempt to kind of mature up this channel a little bit, I just thought I could pull in one of my really great friends and see what we produce. So it's going to be a little simple Q&A, kind of informal interview kind of thing. So yeah, let's get started.
I guess it would probably be most helpful to define some basic terms so that not only you and I have a very real framework with which to talk about these kind of complicated subjects, but also so viewers have a little bit of a framework as well. So some terms that not everyone in the LGB community might not be familiar with are trans. So first of all, trans, and I'm including the asterisk. The asterisk is very important. Trans is an umbrella term for everybody who is non-gender conforming. It doesn't necessarily just mean people like myself who are of one body and are transitioning to another type of body, like FTM, female to male like myself, or MTF, male to female, like trans women. So like I'm a trans man, MTF, trans women. So trans can include not only those, but also non-gender, like gender variant people, agender, really anybody who wants to identify as trans. And that's where the asterisk came in. If you think about like computer language, the asterisk originally meant like large, broad inclusivity. And that's what the asterisk does for the word trans as well. What
about, say, you talked about something like agender and stuff like that. Would you care to define a few of those?
Yeah, so agender is you don't identify as having a gender identity, and that's regardless of your body. And of course, agender individuals can present themselves in terms of their gender expression in any way that they feel comfortable. So there's a lot of broadness under that spectrum.
How long ago did you start this transition, would you say?
Well, so I just finished my first semester at college, and I go to school is where transition and trans identities, queer identities are very well supported. There is a huge community there, so it was a really great place for me to come out to myself and start to come out to other people. When I started school, I identified as a lesbian, not necessarily a cisgender lesbian. A cisgender person is somebody whose gender matches their body in a traditional way. So a female-bodied woman or a male-bodied man are cisgender people. So I didn't necessarily identify as cis. I thought I was genderqueer, but I wasn't really sure what that meant for me yet. About 2 weeks into the semester, I knew that I was done using she pronouns. So I started using pronouns like they, them, and theirs, which are really, they're really great gender-neutral pronouns. Other gender-neutral pronouns include Z here, heres, Z zers, yers, and V vir and veers, but there are a lot of them, and like if you want to change your pronouns, I'd highly recommend exploring them. There's like a whole world of pronouns, and like go crazy and have fun.
That's awesome. Would you care to define in depth a little bit more of like a non-binary person, because that's how you said you began the transition going from a tentatively genderqueer to non-binary to now trans man. Would you care to elaborate more on the non-binary part of that?
Well, for me personally, it's just I knew after a very short time that I was not she, her. I was not a woman completely. So for a little while, I just thought that I was non-binary, meaning neither a man nor a woman. And that's obviously in terms of gender, which is, gender is a very like mental, soulful thing. It's in your heart. It's an untamable fluid force, whereas your sex is a much more concrete thing that you're born with. It's the XY or the XX, the penis, the vagina, or the intersex, if you will. Intersex being, of course, people who are born with ambiguous genitalia. So I thought that I was kind of non-binary, thus the they, them pronouns, but after a while I realized that based on not only my presentation, but just the way that I started feeling. I wasn't non-binary, I was just a guy. Like, they, them eventually started to feel like the wrong pronouns for me, so I switched to he, him, and they feel right.
In between these transitions, would you say that there was one defining moment or a series of defining moments? Was there one morning you woke up in your dorm room and were like, you know what, they, them is not for me, it's definitely he, him, or, you know, what have you?
That's a good question. It's kind of a lot of little moments as they built up for me personally. I remember after I switched to they, them pronouns, I'd been presenting in a very traditionally masculine way and feeling comfortable with it. But then I was like, I haven't worn like girl clothes in forever, so I was like, I'm gonna try to put on a skirt today. And I did, and I was walking around campus and I was like, I feel like I'm in drag.
That's awesome.
Like, it just felt weird. Of course, drag is a performance of the opposite gender, so, or of a very different gender, so it didn't feel right.
You hear a lot about drag queens, but you never, especially in, you know, today's media where they're presented in, there's such a performance factor with, you know, people like Vicky Vox and William Belly, who I respect so much because they're so dope.
Yeah.
But, you know, I was talking to him a couple days ago when I first came to visit him when he got back from college, and we talked about how there are such things as drag kings.
Yeah.
And I just thought, while I knew in back of my head that those existed, I never really thought about it. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. I remember how we talked about the fact that gender versus sexuality are two different things entirely.
Yeah, gender and sexuality are very different, but they do intersect in really interesting ways. So of course gender, like I said before, is this fluid force that's within all of us, or sometimes not in the case of agender individuals. But and it changes from day to day, and it's based not only on our performance but how we feel inside. And I totally forgot what I was saying. Oh, gender and sexuality, right? So that's gender, but sexuality is of course who you love, who you're attracted to, and there are a whole myriad of different sexualities. There are people who are like just purely romantic and they don't prefer to get physical with people. There are people who only prefer to get physical. I mean, you know, it's all out there. But gender as it intersects with sexuality, I think, is a really interesting thing. Just as an example, like, as somebody who used to identify as a lesbian, for me, that was just like, I like women, and that was it. I like thought that it was a simple thing. It's not necessarily. So let's say that, for example, if I were to date another trans man, I could still be kind of considered a lesbian because we're both female-bodied people, but I can't be considered a lesbian because we're both men. So like, is that gay or is it lesbian? And like, so that's why now I prefer to define my sexuality as queer, which is just a really open word, and it basically means like, I love who I love.
So I'm just gonna finish the thought that I was saying before the camera lovingly cut out, was basically a really big eye-opening moment for me was this kind of realization brought about both by self-inspection and talking with other people, would be the fact that sexuality and gender are not black and white. They're very like gray areas, spectrum kind of things. And like something that I was talking with a very close friend of mine who's a teacher is that everyone's bisexual, just a little bit, You call yourself as masculine as you want or as feminine as you want, you're bisexual, even just a little bit. I mean, it's a human nature thing rather than, you know, I mean, if you go back to like a prime, I don't know, thoughts on that, if I don't, any at all?
I wouldn't necessarily say that everyone is bisexual. I would say that everybody's sexuality to some degree is more fluid than they think. Bisexual is a term that is very black and white. I mean, the root bi means two, and there are more than two sexes, there are more than two genders, so like, why would we even have that? If you really want to talk about loving everybody, I think a more accurate term to use is poly. Poly meaning like every or all. So poly individuals are more likely to be openly attracted to people of all genders or all sexes. So, but I do definitely agree that to some degree, every person has more sexual fluidity than they thought possible.
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify that we're not bashing bisexuals in the sense of like, no,
not.
I mean, it is completely legitimate sexuality.
Totally.
You can identify as a bisexual and be attracted to both males and females, or any combination of the two.
Yeah, I just think that when we're talking about sexual fluidity, there's a more accurate word to use, but there are definitely true bisexuals. The rumors about there not being true bisexuals are really
false.
They're not cool. Like, stop, please.
How do you feel about your period?
So just as general knowledge to anybody who's talking to a trans person for their first time, a lot of trans people are very sensitive about specific questions about their bodies. A lot of trans people don't want to be asked about how long they've been on hormones or like the operations that they want done. So unless you ask them, hey, is it cool if I ask you some questions? Then I would avoid asking them personal questions. But I personally am like really open about my body, so I'm happy to talk about it. For now, because I have not started hormone replacement therapy or HRT with testosterone, so I do still get a period, and essentially it just makes me really dysphoric. Dysphoria is a word that trans people use to describe like the uncomfortability or that we feel with our bodies, or like the alienation that we feel because of certain parts of our bodies. Like I get dysphoria when I hear myself speak a lot because my voice is pretty high right now. And that would obviously change if I were doing hormone replacement therapy, as would my period. After 4 or 5 months, my period would stop. But I do still have a period, and it just makes me very dysphoric, and like I already didn't like it when I thought I was a girl, but now it's just like a little bit more of a shitstorm.
If you feel comfortable talking about it, do you want to talk a little bit about coming out, 2 or 3 years ago when you were a lesbian versus coming out now as a trans man?
Yeah, it's definitely a different experience. Coming out as LGB has a specific advantage because people know what LG and B are.
Yeah, and it's media.
Yeah, so when I told my mom, hey, I'm a lesbian, she was like, okay, cool, it's just a preference, like I like pizza or I like tacos, and I was like, I like tacos, mommy. And like it really wasn't a big deal. Very few people gave me a hard time about it. Like some snide comments were made, but it wasn't a big deal, and it didn't change the way I lived my life at all. But now with coming out as trans, because
there's a whole language. There's a whole...
Yeah, as I think you're hearing, there's a whole language that a lot of cisgender people do not know. Even like gay people, a lot of the time, don't know a lot of this. So people in our own acronym, the LGBTQIA acronym, don't know a lot about us. So it's a lot more difficult coming out as trans because you also have to be an educator. And the shitty thing is, it is not a trans person's job to educate other people, but we have to do it sometimes, just by necessity. So I've been teaching my mom all of this and like explaining a lot of things to my family.
Would you say to anyone at home who is thinking about their gender identity or even just their sexuality, would you have any sort of resources that they could go to? I know Trevor Project is a good one that you can talk to, but specifically for trans asterisk people.
Yeah.
Is there any sort of good online sort of websites that they can go to help them figure themselves out?
Yeah, I actually have a bunch of really good links, and we'll probably put those in the description.
In the doobly-doo?
So you guys will have access to all of them. The internet obviously is a great resource. Also, just Tumblr in general has a lot of really trans positive things. I would caution people a lot when you Google trans resources. There are going to be a lot of really great ones with a lot of real legitimate knowledge, but there are also going to be a lot of very biased ones. So I would particularly caution you against looking at sources that are affiliated with feminism. Particularly second wave feminism is very hostile to trans people, so just keep in mind that those sources are going to be biased against trans people and like gender non-conforming people in general. So avoid those, but other than that, the internet is great and enjoy the links.
Is there anything more you want to say before we wrap it up?
Play with your pronouns, people. When people tell you that it's hard to get used to your pronouns, like, it's not that hard. Everyone has done much harder things in their life, and like they will learn. And it's a process. Like you're gonna get mispronounced a little bit, but like it's not always coming from a place of hostility or like rejection. It's habit. So be patient with people when they don't get your pronouns and names right, but also like don't let that keep you from experimenting with names so you can find the right one, or experimenting with pronouns. Like the most important thing is figuring out a way that you're going to be comfortable. So just make that your priority.
The internet can be a pretty accepting place. So I mean, if your home or your school isn't necessarily accepting, you can talk to me. You know, all my links are available below. Just to be clear, this has been a trans positive video. Anything that we've said, if it is offensive to you, we've tried our very hardest not to make it offensive to anyone.
But just if it is, just let us know, and we'll either delete that part or we'll change whatever's necessary.
Yeah, I'll definitely be adding some annotations if something happens. If you have any comments, I would love to spur some sort of discussion. Just talk about it.
Yeah,
We get the word out there. Share this video with your friends, because you know. You might think you know a lot about, you know, GLBT, but you might only know a lot about GLB.
Yeah, there's so much more.
So also be mature. Don't, you know, say anything that would hurt anyone's feelings. Because, you know, we're sitting here and we're trying to make a warm environment, and we really don't need someone like you, if you're a meanie butt, coming in here and undermining all of that.
Yeah. Oh, I do really quickly want to mention certain slurs. So the word, just put it up here, I'm not gonna say it.
Okay. The word, this one.
But this word, if you are not a transgender person, it is not your word, and it is a slur, and it is a very offensive word. So just be a good ally and don't say it, please.
Thank you so much for being here, even though I'm in your room. It was great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Alright. And, yeah, snaps. I will talk to you guys soon. I don't know what I'm gonna put as the end screen. Probably something like this. Alright, I will see you guys later. Probably not next week because I'm a lazy vlogger.